Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Trialogue's second webinar of this year. I'm Kathy Duff, one of the directors at Trialogue, and I'll be facilitating this morning's session. As most of you know, we have these webinars monthly on the last Thursday of the month, and this month we're exploring the topic of strengthening township economies. We've actually never covered this topic before in a webinar, so I'm excited to hear the insights from our panelists this morning. I would also like to thank Volkswagen South Africa for sponsoring this webinar and for continuously supporting our thought leadership platforms. We really do appreciate your support, and thank you to everyone who has joined us this morning. Before we get started, just a few technical notes. So firstly, there's two ways to engage on this call. You can use the chat functionality to introduce yourselves and to speak with fellow delegates and to comment on the content. If you would like to ask a question, please do use the Q&A functionality. I will be taking questions for the panelists from the Q&A box, so please use that, make your questions succinct, and please say which panelist you are addressing your question to, so I can put it to them. There's a short survey that will pop up on your screens at the end of the webinar, and I'd encourage you to please share your thoughts. It does also include space for you to say which topics you'd like to cover in future, so please do share your thoughts with us. And then I know everyone always asks, the session is being recorded, and we will share the video and the write-up on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub after the webinar, so next week sometime, so you can revisit and share these findings. Okay, so moving on to our agenda for the day. After my brief introduction, I'll be handing over to our three panelists for their opening comments. We're then going to dive into a discussion, and the panelists will answer a few of my questions, and then I'd like to take questions from all of you from the Q&A box. And just before we get into the session, we're going to put up the first poll, please, Abdullah, so we can just see who we have with us, and then the panelists can tailor their message to our audience this morning. Okay, I think let's end that poll. We can share the results. We have around half of our delegates from the nonprofit sector. Welcome. And then if we add the big business and small and medium, we have about 30%, with the remainder made up of other. So we look forward to also hearing your questions and seeing about your experience in the townships in the chat. Okay. So I do see a lot of familiar names on the call, and welcome back. But there are also some new names. So if you are a first timer to a Trialogue webinar, I'd like to take a moment to tell you a little about Trialogue. Trialogue is one of the few consultancies that focuses on corporate responsibility. We broadly do two categories of things. The first is the consulting services, and the second are the thought leadership platforms. All of these have the aim of making CSI in South Africa more effective. On the consulting side, the main services are around strategy, development, and support with implementation, as well as monitoring and evaluation of projects and programs. On the thought leadership side, this webinar forms a part of that. We also have our annual conference, and I'd just like to take a moment to say that that's happening in a month and a half on the 14th and 15th of May. Registration is open, and I'd encourage you to register for that, where we can actually, either in person, it is a hybrid conference, so you can register in person or virtually, and there'll be a great chance to connect, and we've got some exciting topics and speakers lined up. We then have our annual Business and Society Handbook, which contains our research that we do every year. We have the Trialogue Knowledge Hub, which is an online repository of information for the sector, freely available. The recording and write-up of this webinar will go on the Knowledge Hub, and there is a wealth of information and case studies on that hub. And then our most recently launched platform is the Trialogue Academy, where there is a mix of online and hybrid learning options and courses. Okay, so briefly, and I'm not going to go through every word here, but briefly a little bit of background to our topic, which, as I said, this is the first time that we're covering. We have covered entrepreneurship before, and I think entrepreneurship is often held up as the kind of panacea or solution to our country's huge unemployment crisis. But, you know, almost a third or over a third of the population live in townships or informal settlements. And the unemployment rates in these townships are significantly higher, almost double that of the national unemployment rate. So if entrepreneurship is going to make a difference to unemployment, we need many entrepreneurs to come from the townships. And on this slide, I've just highlighted two very recent reports that I think are worth looking at if you do want to get more information on this topic. They were both released by the Aspen Network of Development Entrepreneurs in February. So they're recent, and they look at the challenges that face township entrepreneurs as well as the success factors, and they make some recommendations. I think the challenges facing township entrepreneurs are not that different from other entrepreneurs in the country, but they're often exacerbated. And this is highlighted in the report, where they group the challenges into these four categories: macroeconomic, resources and abilities, funding, and business development support, provision or services. The report, this first one, Entrepreneurship in South Africa's Township, goes on to profile a couple of case studies and pull out success factors and recommendations based on that. I'd like to just bring up the second poll, please, Abdullah, now, just to get the audience's input on what you think is the single biggest challenge for township entrepreneurs. And it's a topic that we will explore with our panelists in more detail. So if everyone can vote on the second poll. Still got some votes coming in. Okay, I think, are we sharing the results? Yes, I think we are. We see that most of our delegates, or the biggest category, 28%, say limited access to financial services, products and services, followed by almost equally limited access to markets and inability to scale and lack of skills. Interestingly, in this Andy research report, they actually found that non-financial support was more significant to the entrepreneurs than financial support in terms of success factors. But let's stop sharing that. We will come back to these poll results in the discussion. The next slide just talks to some of Trialogue's research findings. So most large companies support entrepreneurs and small businesses through their enterprise and supplier development programs. The majority of large companies have these. What the stats on this slide talk to is additional or support through CSI of entrepreneurship. And what we see is last year, 38% of companies supported entrepreneur and small businesses through their CSI. And this received an average of 8% of total CSI spend. So not a huge portion, but still supported by many companies through their CSI. And then the right-hand chart shows you that the large majority of that support was for skills development. There's more information on that in the Trialogue handbook as well. And then before we move to our panelists, I just want to show you this short video, which actually features two of our panelists about a township entrepreneur.
In 2019, we started collecting recycling, but we only started with 2 bags, not taking it seriously as a business.
The Kareka Township Economic Development Program, working with Sustainable Livelihoods Foundation, who are the experts in this area. It's about focusing on skills development through training, personal support, and then giving them resources and connections to economic opportunities, commercial opportunities to sustain their businesses.
Then I decided, okay, I'm gonna attend this program. That's where the vision of having a recycling business and a buyback came alive. As you're busy collecting bottles, we picked up that there is another business within this business. So there is a recycling and there's also bottle exchange. And now I started trying to find out where and how far can I go. So there's a lot of things that this program has brought into life for us. In 2019.
Okay, so we have from that video, Nonkqubela Maliza joining us, as well as Fikiswa Bokwe, and then Dr. Andrew Charman, who are each going to start with an opening statement. I'm going to ask Andrew to please turn on your sound and video first to provide us with some context for this webinar and to basically provide us an overview. What is the township economy? How is it characterized based on the research that you do?
Good morning, everyone. Andrew Charman speaking. The township economy, I really want to situate it initially in a historic context to make a particular point. That townships were initially planned as part of a segregated city, and they were to accommodate the Black population that was excluded from the key points of opportunity within the city, within the CBD and industrial areas. So many of the townships were situated on the periphery of the formal city economies. And a key point to note was that these were developed with a predominant residential function. So the townships were not set up and developed to accommodate business and economic opportunities. Now, over time, the form and the function of townships has changed dramatically. They have changed in terms of their spatial characteristics. They no longer look in the same manner that they were initially designed. And increasingly, there are economic activities within townships. People are responding to localized needs by providing goods and services. And the townships themselves have become a key site for people to invest in infrastructure and in property in particular. So in order to understand the township economy, our organization has been trying to pioneer research in this space with the particular intention to inform strategies and policies and programs that can contribute to a changed township environment that can support the growth of businesses. And we've had to do this by literally going out into the field to understand the spatial dynamics of townships. And this was very important for us to survey and do a complete census within an area, because we wanted to understand how businesses operate. We wanted to understand where businesses are situated. We wanted to understand the spatial relationships between businesses. And so, for example, through that process, we started to identify the slow emergence of township high streets. And over the next probably 20 to 30 to 40 years, high streets are going to become increasingly important spaces in which business activities take place. And so this kind of finding is essential for us to inform local government strategies with respect to development of these spaces. But we also wanted to understand and really get a more granular perspective on some of the constraints that impact on businesses. So we've spent a lot of time interviewing business owners, finding out what are the constraints that they face. And indeed, the township environment is not really a straightforward environment. It has particular limitations that are not necessarily felt elsewhere with respect to regulation, with respect to crime, with respect to the availability of space and greenfield space to develop infrastructure. And importantly, we also wanted to understand the infrastructural dynamics of the township economy. So we've spent a lot of time over the last 10 to 15 years really studying how the form of the township as it's developed. We've looked at investment in property, in housing, in small-scale affordable rental housing, which has been one of the fastest growing components of the township economy. And then we've looked at things like transport, because transport is absolutely critical in connecting people from the place where they live to the place of economic opportunities. So our work is really to try and understand the dynamics of this economy, which is increasingly vibrant, but I also feel that we shouldn't overestimate the scope and the scale of the economy. It still is a marginal space, and I think one of our key conclusions from many years of research in a different context is the biggest challenge we have in the township economy is that much of the money and the wealth that is generated within that geographic space actually leaves the townships and is invested elsewhere. So a big challenge is how do we not only stimulate business in the township economy, but how do we ensure that some of that money circulates within that economy and returns to reinvestment in businesses and other important opportunities. So Kathy, that is an opening statement. I'm more than happy to clarify any of those points.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll definitely come back to some of them, and thanks for some of the additional challenges that you raised, like around space, regulation and crime in the townships, as well as your kind of key insights that the economy is still marginal and that most of the money ends up outside of the townships rather than circulating in it. I'm going to move on to Nonkqubela Maliza, please, for your opening statement. Nonkqubela is the Director of Corporate and Government Affairs at Volkswagen South Africa. Morning, and I'd like to ask you to please tell us more about Volkswagen's Township Development Program. What prompted you as a company to work in and around the townships surrounding your operation, and what are some of the lessons that you've learned?
Thank you, Kathy, and good morning to everybody. Yeah, our Kariga Township Development Economic Program. So first of all, why did we do it and what was it? First of all, it was a very ambitious program in terms of growing or moving township economic development, promoting entrepreneurship, growth and quality of entrepreneurs in our local ecosystem. So why did we do this? I mean, Volkswagen has been in South Africa for 72 years making and selling cars. We pride ourselves in terms of our value system. One of our key values, both locally and globally, is that responsibility and responsibility for solving complex and important social problems. If you're living in South Africa, I mean, I think we all know the problem of unemployment and youth unemployment in particular. We spend a lot of time and money and energy investing in education and in youth development. And we really felt that in terms of addressing the unemployment problem, we really needed to look at entrepreneurship, and in particular in our local ecosystem in the township. And when we started this program, there was a rising, I don't want to say trend, but there was a lot of focus in the city. Township economic development had become a key focus area, starting all the way from National Treasury, and there were many programs. I mean, Andrew can talk more about them, the city support programs and many others. And we also wanted to play a role in this in our local community. So our plant is located in Kariga, and there are 3 immediate townships surrounding surrounding our plant, where something like 80% of our workforce comes from. And so enterprise development and supply development is something that we've been doing for a long time. But when we started with this Township Economic Development Program, we decided to, because we wanted it to be meaningful and impactful. So we decided to really ground it in empirical research and evidence. So we partnered with the Sustainable Livelihoods Foundation, who started, so the project was done in kind of 3 phases. The first 8 weeks was really, more like a census, really, where Sustainable Livelihoods Foundation spent, I think, between something like 8 to 12 weeks in the 3 surrounding townships, traversed every single site of economic activity, and understood exactly how the township economy in our township looked like, what activities were happening, what were the gaps, what were the constraints, and they mapped this, and it was so participatory research was the first part of it. And then the second phase, which we then extended, was a 6-month pilot, then based on the findings of this, and this was like a business support intervention where we selected our theory of change. We selected in three sectors, which was the automotive sector, the personal services sector, and in the green economy or recycling. We selected 48 entrepreneurs or micro entrepreneurs who were the most industrious, most coachable, most amenable to learn, and we put them through a 10-month pilot, which involved financial training, personal financial training, but skills development and also personal development. And the real aim was to move these businesses or these micro enterprises from being purely survivalist to being genuinely sustainable, value-adding, profitable businesses over time, to put them through injecting skills, knowledge, support, and exposure to both other funders and also commercial activities, and also strengthening local institutions and creating a strong ecosystem. So that's what our Kariga Township Development Program is or was. And we learned a lot of learnings in this process. The key learning, as Andrew always reminded me, is that supporting township economic development is much, much harder than building a Volkswagen Polo, which is something that we've been doing for 72 years, because as he also already just mentioned, townships and the conditions in town. First of all, entrepreneurship is one of the most difficult things to do in general, but township economic development is the challenges are interwoven and they are complex. And I note, Kathy, your survey, which says which is the single biggest constraint, and I want to say that really there is no single biggest constraint. There are a multiplicity of constraints that affect township businesses, and they all have to be addressed, if not simultaneously, but in parallel, really, in order to make progress in this area. The structural issues, the political issues, the economic issues, but also, for me, I think social issues, social institutional issues that really have a big, provide big obstacles and constraints to the success of township businesses. Yeah, I'll pause there.
Thank you, Nonkqubela. That was a great overview of the program and your biggest learning. And I look forward to hearing a bit more about the outcomes when we move on to the Q&A. Our third and final panelist, we're lucky enough to have one of the entrepreneurs that was supported through the program, who you saw in the video, Fikiswa Bokwe, who's the founder of VWSA Recycling. So Fikiswa, if you could turn on your camera and mic now, I'd like you just to tell our audience a little bit about your involvement in the Volkswagen Township Development Program, how you were selected to participate, and which elements of the program you found most useful.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Fikiswa. Can you turn on your camera?
All right.
Thank you.
This is happening. Hi, my camera. There's a problem of my host disabling my camera. Can you hear me?
Abdullah. Yes, we can hear you. Thanks. Abdullah, could you turn it on? And Fikiswa, maybe you can start talking, and Abdullah will try to get your camera on.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be in this Zoom meeting with everybody. Hello.
There you are. Hi.
Yes. What I can say is that whilst I was actively hustling and working and selling my product to different stakeholders like cannibals and chicks, I got noticed by this program. This program, Livelihoods. I was at my home with a visible bag. Then that's where I got to be invited, and I then was invited to this selecting workshop. What they did for me was to equip me with workshops, with mentoring or coaching, which those things taught me how to manage a business, and it also taught me how to identify my business strengths, my business weaknesses. And what I came out there with is something that I feel that I have achieved, is a full confidence of knowing what I am doing pertaining my business. And also with their involvement in my business, it has made me to encourage other people to stand up and do it for themselves. That will be all for me. Thank you.
Don't go away. Can you leave your camera on?
Okay.
We do want to hear more about your experience. And can I ask our other two panelists to please turn their cameras back on, because we're going to move to the Q&A part of the session. I would like to encourage all our delegates to put questions. I haven't been following the chat, so please put your questions in the Q&A box. I'll start with some questions from myself, but do encourage you, now that you've heard some of the context from our panelists, I encourage you to put questions in the box that I'll pick up for each of them. So I'm going to start with Andrew. Please, you provided a great context and some of the key characteristics and challenges for entrepreneurs in townships. What do you think the role of companies is in supporting the township economy?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Look, obviously, the township economy, it's a complex dynamic that does require municipalities in the state to play a key role. But I think the key message here is that the state, in its current situation, has neither the capabilities nor the capacity to really shape and drive the development of that economy. So the role of companies and corporates in particular is absolutely essential to ensure that we have an outcome that is good for South Africa and good for business at a very high level. But I think there are some more specific reasons I'd like to share with you. In the case of the Volkswagen Foundation, they have a geographic interest in the area immediately surrounding the factory. Most of the communities look for employment in the factory, and of course, the business can only support a certain level of employment. So, supporting entrepreneurship in the surrounding townships is absolutely critical to the larger sustainability of the area. But I'd like to also share a couple of other examples. I think companies also need to think about some of the externalities of their product, and the recycling sector is a really good example, because you're dealing with products that have incredibly thin margins when it comes to the recycling component and getting them to market. If you travel around townships in South Africa, you will find them littered with bottles, plastic, etc. And all of these products were once brand, and they were once corporate products. So the support in getting these products into market, into a sustainable and circular economy, I think is critical. Then there's key issues of brand. Something that's often not spoken about is the fact that a lot of brands are under threat. We did surveys many years ago to look at the way that brands have been affected by fake and counterfeit products, etc. And that trend is certainly on the rise in South Africa. And I'm not going to go into particular brands, but there is really a need to think about brands and the protection and the integrity of brands. Then it comes to investment, and any business that looks at the township and thinks it's a static, undynamic, not changing environment is completely wrong. The townships in 50 years have changed dramatically, and there is space of very rapid investment in property, in vehicles, and so there are key investment opportunities, and the financial services have really missed a number of opportunities, and where they have got involved, they've often got involved in a very high risky way, not really understanding the nature of the economy, and that's partly why, you know, taking the kind of research that VW supported is so critical, because you can get your fingers very quickly burnt if you don't really understand the environment. And then the last reason is really that I think corporates have a key role in shaping the future of South Africa and the future of the economy. At the moment, the trajectory is one of high levels of informality and informalization. And ultimately, that's going to affect corporate businesses, because if you're competing against informal businesses, particularly informal businesses at scale, you're not going to do very well, because they can operate at lower cost points in many ways. So playing a key role in shaping and enabling the formalization of these economies is really critical. I know this has been a big issue in the liquor sector, but not only the liquor sector, it affects the retail and many others. So there's many reasons why business should be there. The big challenge is business is not really there. Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks, Andrew. We're going to have to come back to that last statement of yours, business not being there, in a sec. But I just want to move to Nonkqubela. And I know I had a question for you around interventions and which corporate interventions kind of work in the townships. And I guess looking at, so Andrew's spoken about a lot of the reasons that companies should be in the townships, but what are some of the ways that they can? Obviously, there's supporting entrepreneurs. Are there other ways? You know, can township businesses be incorporated into the company's supply chain? And I'm going to add one additional question to that, which is in this pilot you spoke about, you mentioned that you supported 48 micro enterprises that had the potential, and your objective is really around growing sustainable businesses. What were the kind of outcomes of that? And what can you look at in terms of, you know, supporting 48, you know, how many can we expect will actually be sustainable businesses? Or is it just too early to tell? Sorry, lots of questions.
Yeah, lots of questions. Yeah, unsurprisingly, because I mean, this, like I said, and I think the evidence shows, and I mean, I think the research that Sustainable Livelihoods has done in very different, many different townships shows, is that first of all the contexts are very different. All townships are different in different ways. But of course, there are some common, you know, commonalities. Just to address some of your questions, and you'll remind me of some of them if I forget them. But I think the best way, I mean, there's no best way. So because townships are different, I mean, we, for instance, Gariga is it's a small town in the Eastern Cape, one of 72 small towns in the Eastern Cape, and it's the only industrialized one, okay? where Volkswagen is based and a few suppliers. So it would seem, and even 60 to 70% of all people that are employed are either employed at Volkswagen or in a Volkswagen supplier. And even a lot of these micro entrepreneurs, particularly in the automotive sector, are either ex-employees of Volkswagen, or there's some direct or indirect relationship with Volkswagen or a Volkswagen supplier. So I think with any entrepreneur and any corporate, I think the ultimate goal is always trying to make sure that you connect the entrepreneur to sustainable market access, and therefore to your value chain somehow. I mean, that's always the ultimate goal. But we have to be honest, about who and what micro and enterprises are, their capabilities, and what they can or cannot do. It is very difficult to become a part of an automotive manufacturing company's value chain. For a whole variety of reasons, the fixed investment, capital investment required, the technology, the safety requirements, and all of those things that that are required in order to be to be part of at least what we call the direct value chain, that is anything that has to do with manufacturing a car. But then, in terms of servicing, aftermarket service, and the car park that's already there are potential opportunities there. So I think for me, the important thing when working with entrepreneurship is to really understand the nature of the entrepreneurs and the ecosystem in your area. So to root it in research and empirical evidence rather than what we believe or what we think is right. As Andrew has said, townships have evolved and continue to evolve in different ways. When we started, I expected to find a lot more young people, running businesses. When we did our research in our 3 communities, we didn't find that many young micro entrepreneurs. In fact, in our townships, a lot of young people have left, in search of better opportunities in other places for a variety of reasons. So for me, firstly, you have to root whatever intervention, whatever investment you make in solid, empirical, testable evidence and research. And it has to be participatory, and inclusive, so that it can be meaningful. And I think no one organization can do this. You need to work with the municipality, because they're responsible for the policy, zoning, and all of that. But as Andrea said, unfortunately, it is in most municipalities very difficult to work with the municipalities for a variety of reasons, including their capabilities and the way they generally work when it comes to this area. But also connecting entrepreneurs to opportunities and market access opportunities, their experiential learning, just making sure that you expose them to what they don't know. But then more importantly, just forming networks amongst each other, peer group networks, and strengthening the in situ social support, I think is very important. And then the coaching part, ongoing coaching and business development services. What we found is that we always try, as corporates and whatever, we always try to do a short-term intervention, but short-term interventions are limited in terms of what they really can achieve over the long. Even our pilot, which was a 10-month intervention, whilst I think we made significant progress, and there is some evidence, because we did, we measured improvements in things like financial record keeping of the company, number of growth of customers, the investments that the companies were making in terms of their own marketing strategies, branding, investments that they made in their own branding. But it is all of us that run businesses or that work in businesses. Everything that every skill that you've learned in a significantly longer time than 3 or 10 months. And we're all continuously learning and growing and being exposed to rapidly changing technologies and learning all the time. So short-term interventions, when you are intervening at the heart, in micro enterprises that face so many challenges, is limited. So I think this is why no one company can do it on your own. You do need collaboration, you do need partnerships, so that it can be sustainable, so that you can really get sustainable results over time. I don't know if I've answered all your questions, Kathy.
You have. Thanks, Nonkqubela. And I think such an important reminder that short-term interventions, and I think not just here, but across the sector, are limited necessarily. I do see questions coming in. Please, and I see a lot of them in the chat. Please, can you put them in the Q&A, because I'll be taking them from there. Just before we move on to some of those, one question for Fikiswa. I'm not sure if you saw the results of that poll that we did regarding challenges that township entrepreneurs face. Certainly the delegates in our audience found that it was largely financial, followed by skills and access. As Nonkqubela reminded us, there's no single one big challenge. There's a lot of them that need to be addressed. What have you found to be some of the challenges in growing your business in the township, and how have these been overcome?
Thank you, Kathy. I know finances will always be a bigger challenge. Also, as much as we are trying to move away from thinking that way and try and see what or how to manage things around our businesses, I have figured that the other challenges that one can come across is taking that first step. I felt like if you knowing that you are in the business world and you are not taking that first step in trying by all means to work around your business, to equip yourself, it will become a bigger challenge, because you will always say, I'm waiting for someone to help me out. Also, I felt that denying yourself and sacrifice yourself for your business, it's either you build or you break yourself while you are doing that. And also, one thing, while you are busy trying to build yourself and trying to put your business in a particular level, I also realized that as my business is in the yard, is it at home, but you cannot grow in a smaller space like that. Then I figured that also a business space to have a business space is very important. It becomes also one of the biggest challenge. Another thing that I've picked up is that as informal businesses, or as you are growing, going forward, trying to maintain your business, is that you need to register your business. Some of the opportunities are online. It's difficult to get access on those things when you are not registered, when you do not have, especially with my sector. Some of the challenges that I meet is the people to work with, people who are committed, people who are willing to throw themselves and do what we should do to make the business stand. And then you find out that you have to register your business, and then you have to do stock files, you have to do a co-op, or you have to do PTYs, being an owner, one owner. And some of the subsidies, some of the the funds that are out there. They need you to be in a certain environment, whether you are a corporate, whether you are a particular, you cannot get you cannot find yourself qualifying to get some of the funds out there because maybe you are not registered. You have challenges of not having teams by you to work together like COPs would want maybe 5 people to be in that sector. Or sometimes you cannot apply for a certain funds because you are a PTY, one owner. Now it becomes very difficult as a person who has been found working at home, seeing this vision, want to make something out of it, and then there's a lot of stop and goes. You cannot just flow through. Yeah, that's what I've picked up. Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks so much, Fikiswa, for that personal account. We're getting lots of appreciation from the delegates, and I think just taking that step, as you said, is so important. So thank you for sharing your personal experience. We've got loads of questions coming in now and limited time. I'm going to pose one from Victor for Andrew. And it actually speaks to that last point you made, which I also wanted to pick up on when you just ended by saying not many corporates are actually in the townships or helping it, or working with the townships. Are there any statistics from your foundation which gives a sort of idea of how many companies are active in townships that are giving back to communities? Obviously, we see VW on this webinar, but and you commented there weren't many. Do you have any idea of how many, who, and why there's so few?
I'm sorry, I can't comment on the data. I simply don't have the data. And why there's so few? Well, I think obviously it's not core business, so it's understandable that companies do not necessarily see it as part of their core mandate. But I think there is a greater need for a strategic consideration. And one has to bear in mind that the township is a geographic space. So while corporates are doing a lot of great CSI work and supporting a lot of entrepreneurship and community initiatives, some of that support doesn't necessarily land within the geographic space of the township, and the way the support is configured is not necessarily benefiting that particular context. So I think it's important to just make a few of those distinctions.
Thank you, Andrew. And there's quite a few comments and questions that have come in on this next issue around formalization. I'm going to read a comment from Nonkqubela, and then it speaks to a similar comment from Janice. Nonkqubela says, this is a particularly interesting conversation because we collectively seem to be steering to formalizing township economies and structures as opposed to explicit decolonization, which begs the question of why we attempt to strengthen township economies. Whose agenda does this serve? So that's the start, like formalization. Should we be doing it? Whose agenda does it serve? And that's linked to the question from Janice, which is for Andrew again, regarding formalization. Formalization is not for everyone. Do you think government, economic development agencies should think differently about informal business and find a way to motivate it and fund it? There is a bit more there, but that's where I'm going to ask Andrew to please comment on this formalization.
Yeah, thank you. Can I jump straight in? This is a really critical issue. Number one, and this is absolutely essential, is that informality does not necessarily mean small or poor. Critical. In fact, the fastest growing component of the informal economy in this country has been driven by the non-poor. And we can look at, and it's not happening in the township. So the non-poor are informalizing very rapidly because of the weak capacity of the state to regulate. So that's an important point. When it comes to formalization in the township, we are not arguing or advocating for the formalization of poor micro enterprises, your street traders, your hawkers. it's absolutely clear that these businesses should be exempt. So there needs to be some kind of understanding and recognition that the bar needs to be set at an appropriate level. And the challenge we have is not formalization per se, but the bar to formalization is incredibly high, I beg your pardon. We apply the same set of standards for large corporate businesses to comply with as we're applying in the township. So we're not saying that is acceptable. We're saying lower the bar. But we're also saying that, you know, when you get into a taxi to go to work, you want that taxi to be roadworthy. You want the driver to have a driving permit. Okay. When you go into a bar, you want the bar to be licensed. You want there to be flushing toilets, for example. You want there to be lighting, parking, and all sorts of things. You want there to be management of waste. These are consequences. Safe taxis, safe bars, for example, are consequences of formalization. Without formalization, the businesses may not get to a point at which they're providing a valuable public good and service. So I think we need to really just put a really clear set of perspectives on this issue. Formalization doesn't necessarily need to be a constraint, and obviously we don't want to formalize the very poorest, but we do want to make sure that businesses that are sufficiently robust and have the means to comply with a rules-based system must comply with the rules-based system. Too many businesses in the township economy are not complying with the rule-based system, okay, and should be complying with the rule-based system, whether that relate to the products that they sell, the employment conditions within the business, the environmental health and safety, etc. So, you know, it's about getting the right approach. And at the moment, we've got the completely wrong approach within government. It's too difficult to formalize, and formalization will kill any small business. But if we give up on the idea of formalization, we give up on the idea of a rules-based economy, and then we are on a slippery slope.
Thanks.
So can I just add? I just want to say, I mean, yeah, to add, I agree with everything that Andrew said, but I also want to say that for me, formalization also in general in business represents progress and development. So, I mean, there's you know, whilst, I mean, I don't know them, it sounded, part of the question sounded like there was an ideological, I don't know, position or posture around formalization. But the formalization, I think, that we are advocating for, and I think that is necessary, is that leads to, you know, positive development and growth and sustainability of the business. Micro and appropriate formalization. So I think we really do have to have the correct lens on that.
Thanks, Nonkqubela. And I think you've used a good word there that speaks to what Andrew was saying, appropriate. I mean, we heard from Fikiswa some of the challenges she's had, you know, and as Andrew said, the requirements are the same for a small business in the township as a large company. It makes no sense. So I think appropriate's a good word to use there. We are rapidly running out of time. I'm going to put one more question to Andrew and then ask for closing statements. This one comes from Dijon. Are there particular businesses and townships that are more prevalent than others? And what success factors make them different?
Yeah, prevalence. So the most common businesses are probably the businesses retailing grocery products, food, and food-related services businesses. That they would be, I would say, number one. And if we include food and beverages, that without a doubt is the most prevalent form of business. Second would probably be transport services, because of the critical need to connect people to economic opportunities within the township economy. And then sort of as we go down, personal services are absolutely critical, and these are real growth opportunities that we see, whether it's from health-related services, hair care, etc. That is a very important component, as well as services that are providing the repair, maintenance of goods and services. And then as I said right up front, the big growth area is property, investment in property, development of housing, as well as the provision of accommodation units. So that's the top order of the economy, and it really reflects the nature of goods and services and investment opportunities within that geographic space.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm going to move on to closing statements from our panelists. Thanks to all the delegates for those questions that have been coming through. Nonkqubela, if I can start with you, and I'm going to ask each panelist to talk to, if you, given who our delegates are, which is largely nonprofits and companies, what are the 1 or 2 recommendations you would make to nonprofits and companies? And I think I can guess one based on what you've been saying, who are looking to support township economies or work with people in townships. I think you're on mute, Nonkqubela.
Sorry. Yeah, I would say understand that it's difficult work. It's not easy. There are no easy, ready-made solutions, okay? Any kind of cut and paste is not going to yield lasting results. So you've got to be committed to doing the hard work, which was going to involve a lot of really understanding what is really driving success or lack of success in your community, in whatever sector that you choose to work in. It's going to require collaboration, with economic and commercial actors, funders who can be catalysts. And I also really do want to say social institutions, social infrastructure is really critical in townships. It needs to be strengthened. We cannot ignore the absence of social support and infrastructure and the impact it has on entrepreneurs and micro entrepreneurs. But for me, we also can't let the municipalities and the policymakers get away with not doing what they are supposed to do, because there are issues that only they can address, and they have an impact on the success and the quality of entrepreneurs and township entrepreneurship. I mean, Andrew, maybe if you remember, I can't remember the statistics offhand. In the 3 townships that we, surrounding our company, of the more than 1,000 businesses that were surveyed by Andrew and his team, who traversed those townships on foot and on bicycles for 10 to 12 weeks, only 30% of those businesses were found to be actually profitable, proper businesses. The rest were micro enterprises that were barely survivalist businesses, and for a whole variety of reasons. And of the 30% that were profitable, 80% of them were not even owned by people from the local, from the local townships. So right there is something that we have to understand. Why is it? What is it that makes other businesses more sustainable, more profitable than others? And what is driving that? Because if you ignore that, every intervention that you make will not yield results or sustainable results. So, I mean, I could go on, but yeah, I think I'll pause.
Thank you, Nonkqubela. I think you've highlighted throughout this session the importance of the evidence base, the research, which I think is really valuable. Andrew, sorry, I'm not going to give you that question because I just wanted your closing statement to look at 2 things which have come up repeatedly in the questions and chats. One is any of your research available publicly? So that should be quick. And the other is a lot of questions and comments have come up relating to safety and how crime and safety is such a big issue, obviously for the entrepreneurs themselves, but also for the investors. Can you close by addressing those 2?
Yeah. Firstly, some of our research can be accessed via a book we published called Township Economy. It should be available online, and you can order it. The issue of safety and security is absolutely critical, probably the most important thing for many businesses, the challenge for many businesses. And I think the Nonkqubela's point is critical. Companies can't do it alone. Municipalities, provincial governments, national governments have to play a key role. And I would say I would encourage companies to do two things. I mean, one is to look at partnering with government to just build and strengthen that weak capacity. And the second thing is to continue to pressurize government to play its role in addressing these environmental challenges such as safety and security. So that's my final word.
Thank you, Andrew. And I hope everyone saw the copy of your book that Nonkqubela showed us, and which hopefully we can order. Fikiswa, I'm going to give you the last word as an entrepreneur in the township. What would your recommendations be for our delegates? What support is most valued?
Okay, thank you so much, Kathy. As I was looking on how my township and the young people around us having troubles getting an employment, I figured that sometimes we get a lot of people that comes and train us and skill us, and then at the end of the day we sit down and do nothing about that. Currently I am with another MPO that we are saying, young people, elderly people, vuka uzenzele. Do it yourself. There's no other way. We are trying to encourage young people to stand up, to use what we have. You know, sometimes you have a skill that requires you to have equipment, but you cannot do anything about that. We are saying hustle. Try and find something that doesn't require equipment, something that doesn't require money for now. For instance, I was thinking about a young lady who can braid your hair without really having to have equipment. Use that, take it from there, grow from there. And for the people who are supporting us, I wish they could recognize the passion, the resilience that one in these informal businesses that people have, the potential that is there. And with their support, I think if they could continue to back us up, especially if they were to stay in mentoring, stay in coaching, because sometimes, for instance, you will find out that I can do the product side of things, but my administration is failing. And you need someone who's going to be there, someone who's going to call you behind, just to know that when you get to a certain level of your business, then I think you will be able to say, I've got this now. There's no way that I could back up from here, because most of the time we might be sitting and doing businesses not knowing that we are having gold in our hands. But then there are people already there who knows with such an idea, with such a business idea, this is how and how far you can go. And there are people who's been in businesses who wanted to do bigger things about their businesses, but because of the challenge that we have mentioned here, those little things, they are the ones that are killing the passions. They are the ones that are making young people not so sure. And I was also most probably on one question that has popped up before, asking what can the stakeholders do? You know, I was thinking with nepotism, with favorism that is really happening with the projects that are out there in the locations. Maybe our business people, the stakeholders, they could come together and work with the community in saying, we will provide these things, but we need to see a change. Maybe there will be young people like me, there will be elderly people at my age, because I'm not that young anymore, at my age who are saying, I have a skill. I can use this skill to teach others. In that way, we are grooming even the young people to avoid sitting, to avoid sitting and saying, no one is doing anything about us, or no one is saying anything, because you find out there are people there who's got skills who can actually teach those young people. That is work to the person who will be teaching. And as we go on and on as the communities, we want those stakeholders not to stay far away from us. Bring those imbizos, encourage us, show us the way. Bring those people who are doing applications. You know, sometimes you've got a long application online and you don't even have a way of sustaining that application so that you can apply and finish that application. Try and get involved, especially, you know, sometimes we've got people like Livelihoods, they will train you in maybe 10 months. You would want you want those people to come back. You would want them to come and see how far you've gone, and then maybe the strength of holding on there, the strength of holding on and fighting that your business should stand. Because I know I wasn't complaining about formalizing the business. It actually is a growth. But the things that we need to go through to get to that stage, those things are a killer of passion. Those things can really put you down. But we need those people not to sit in their office after they have come out. They must come back and say, how far are you now? Because there is a lot happening in the business world. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thanks, Fikiswa. I think that was the perfect note to close on. So thanks so much for your sharing your insights and your experience. I know we've run over time, but thank you to all our delegates, and a huge thank you to our 3 panelists. I think that's been fascinating, and we could have carried on many unanswered questions. As I mentioned, the recording and a write-up of this will be shared with everyone that registered and will be put on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub. Otherwise, I hope you all have a good long weekend, and I hope to see many of you at our conference in May. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, everyone. Okay. Goodbye.